The strike run was over. Coordinates cleared, targets neutralized. One by one, the jets peeled off and headed home. Leah was already turning to follow when she saw it, a thin line of smoke rising from somewhere far off route. Command didn't see it. The HUD showed nothing. She was told to return to base. She said nothing. She banked low, dropped into the canyon, and armed her last burst. Minutes later, a pinned squad radioed in. "We're still breathing. Someone saw us." No one knew who it was. Leah did, and she was already on her way home. Leah's A-10 shook as she pulled out of the final attack run, a long, even arc above flat earth that no longer burned. The dust behind her had already settled. She scanned the HUD and confirmed weapons expended. One last cannon burst remained, chambered but untouched. The GAU-8's readout blinked quietly in amber, just above a fuel indicator that hovered near bingo range. She keyed the comms and waited. "Warthog 3, you're off target. Return to base," came the clipped voice from command. Her hand eased off the stick. She didn't reply immediately. The air was steady now, a warm crosswind sliding across the canopy. She could feel the temperature difference along the metal skin. Below, the mission zone looked quiet, sterilized by overlapping strike passes. There was nothing left to see. "Copy," she said, voice steady. A pause followed. Then, another voice cut in with less formality. "Tell 3 to let the real dogs finish next time. She's still flying with training wheels." The laughter on the channel was light, not cruel. The kind of tone meant to stick without leaving a bruise. Leah didn't respond. Her thumb stayed off the comm switch. One of the Raptors peeled overhead, sonic edge slicing a pale trail across the high sky. It would hit the tarmac 10 minutes before she did. Maybe less. She turned gently toward base, her angle wide, her altitude conservative. The jet was old and honest. She liked that. Nothing in the flight profile needed performance anymore. They had what they came for. She just needed to go home, fuel light and quiet. But as she brought her heading east, something caught her eye on the low horizon. A plume, thin, tall, rising too fast and too straight. Not a flare, not a burn-off, and not from the grid they had targeted. It was outside the mapped strike zone by miles. She blinked and recalculated. Rough guess. The column was 11 kilometers south of the planned return corridor, tucked somewhere near the edge of the ridge canyons. No satellite pings, no overlay marks. The HUD showed nothing. She tilted slightly and watched it again. The smoke was narrow, almost vertical. No wind dispersion at low altitude. That meant active heat recent, maybe ongoing. Leah opened the comms again. "This is Warthog 3. I'm observing a smoke column en route, bearing 241, requesting brief vector deviation to investigate." Silence. Then the first voice again, neutral and firm. "Negative. There are no authorized targets remaining in that sector. RTB confirmed." She watched the smoke for another 5 seconds. It wasn't dispersing. It was growing. The base of the plume now had an orange edge. Vehicle fire. Not an old one. Fresh. Isolated. Too clean to be ambient wreckage. "Copy," she said again. Her hands stayed on the controls. Her A-10 didn't turn. Wind began to shift at altitude. A light cross-current made the air beneath her ripple slightly. She dropped 500 feet, easing into visual confirmation range. The cockpit was noisy now. Panel vibration. Slight metal whine under stress. She didn't mind. The Warthog wasn't built for elegance. It was built to tell the truth when you were close enough to see it. She glanced down at the cannon toggle. One burst left. The HUD didn't blink in warning. It wasn't a crisis yet. "Warthog 3, confirm course change," came the voice again. Less calm this time. "Confirm RTB vector." She let the radio stay open a moment longer before clicking it off entirely. There were times when silence didn't mean disobedience. It meant accuracy. Leah dropped again, this time into low-terrain banding. Her ground radar lit for a moment, then faded. She was under the layer now. The smoke rose like a line drawn in motion. Its base sat low, possibly in a canyon cut, That meant the fire wasn't random, it was shielded. Someone didn't want it seen, or someone didn't want to be seen. She checked fuel again. 100.0. It would be enough. Barely. Just enough to make the turn, do the pass, and limp home if nothing went wrong. If everything went exactly right. The air grew warmer. Dust eddied past the canopy. Her A-10 rattled slightly as she banked into the ridge gap, tilting the wings to absorb the shift. The sunlight now came from behind her. Forward visibility narrowed. The canyons weren't charted for this altitude. She toggled the burst pre-arm. The system chirped once. The GAU-8 barrel rotated to ready. The smoke grew closer. Her targeting HUD still showed nothing. No friendlies pinging, no call-outs, no signals. Just the smoke. Just what she saw. The canyon mouth opened ahead, a jagged cut of sand and shadow. She turned toward it with quiet precision, altitude bleeding cleanly. The sky behind her was still wide. The space ahead was narrow and waiting. She lowered flaps one notch, steadied the throttle, and began her run into the silence. Leah's quarters sat behind the third hangar, just past the bulkhead wall that divided ground crews from flight ops. It wasn't large. The walls were painted in standard matte gray, the kind that never reflected light, only absorbed it. Her bed was narrow, made every morning with perfect folds. Above it, 3 hand-marked topographic charts were taped edge to edge, their corners worn soft from years of being adjusted and rechecked. On each, flight routes were drawn by hand in pencil, some light, others pressed hard enough to dent the paper. Her desk was functional. 2 pens, 1 flight log, 1 sketchbook with its spine fraying. She kept it stacked neatly beneath a folded cloth that had once been part of her father's work apron, long since torn at the edge and stitched with black thread. It still smelled faintly of grease. She had never tried to decorate the space. No plaques, no photos. Just 1 old patch from a rescue squad that had made headlines 5 years ago. They had flown a low-level evac under blackout conditions. The woman who pulled the last survivor out had never been named. Leah remembered that. She kept the patch pinned to the corner of her window curtain, facing in, not out. Years ago, before she was rotated out of her tactical role, Leah had been considered sharp, not flashy, but fast. Her instincts were respected. She had memorized terrain profiles faster than most of the flight class and knew how to trim an A-10 by feel before her classmates finished reading the manual. She didn't brag. She didn't correct others in briefings. Her edge wasn't personality. It was calibration. The change came during a stateside demo run. The briefing had been rushed. Simulated strike targets placed too close to a live refueling vehicle that wasn't supposed to be on site. Leah saw at first an unusual glint just off the staging road that caught light in a way nothing should have. She made the call, broke formation, fired early to redirect the run and signal a stop. She was right. The refueling crew had been mispositioned, but by the time the report filtered up, the damage had already been done. No formal punishment, just rotation. First to auxiliary briefings, then to low-priority sorties, then to strike shadows, the kind that ran parallel to the real work but never touched it. Her call sign stayed active, but no one used it. Her presence was folded into paperwork, not plans. She never complained, never asked for reassignment. She flew her runs with clean logs and complete checklists. If the mission was short, she logged recovery drills in the air. If it was quiet, she reviewed wind maps by hand in the evenings. Her tools never changed. 1 pencil, 1 sketch pad. Her father's voice in her head reminding her that the jet tells you more through its bones than its screens. He had worked warthogs for 27 years, had never flown one, but he could tell you the status of a turbine just by the way the seat vibrated on startup. Leah had grown up on his shoulder, watching his hands work through panels and latches. He taught her to listen to the change in engine pitch between full roll and afterburner, even though the A-10 didn't use afterburners. It was the metaphor that mattered. Know what you're hearing, not just what you're told. When she first qualified, he gave her a small socket wrench, scuffed and old, wrapped in cloth. Not as a joke, as a reminder. The airframe is smarter than the screen, he said once. If it rattles, it's talking to you. The wrench still sat in the bottom drawer of her flight bag, not used, but carried. Most evenings, after the rest of the crew cleared the locker rooms and noise dropped to nothing, Leah stayed behind. She'd spread out her maps across the desk and draw terrain profiles from memory, ridge height, crosswind potential. She traced canyon runs that weren't scheduled, just studied. Her hand moved slow and deliberate. Her sketches were clean. She drew not for submission, but because the paths helped her remember where she had once been allowed to fly. A young pilot named Mateo had once lingered behind while she drew. He was fresh out of rotation, full of nerves and ambition. He asked her how she mapped turn radius in narrow valleys. She showed him how to use wind taper and rock shadow to predict lift break. He nodded, wide-eyed, and said, "Thanks," like he meant it. A week later, he got picked up for a joint training group and left. She heard him mention her once in passing at a briefing. Then, never again. That was fine. She hadn't expected anything. People didn't remember what they learned in silence. Tonight, after the canyon smoke had cleared and her plane sat cooling in the dark, Leah unrolled a fresh grid and began sketching again. She didn't log the smoke column, didn't name the ridge, just began tracing the contour of that narrow cut where the wind turned before the eye could follow. She marked the elevation by thumb, ran her pencil down the side of the wall. A perfect drop angle, if you trusted yourself. No label, no mission code. Just another line in the book. One more route memorized, in case someone ever needed to ask what she had already seen. The canyon narrowed quickly. From altitude, the cut had looked manageable, 2 walls of rust-colored stone converging along a dry riverbed with soft bends on approach. But now, below the ceiling and inside the terrain, everything had compressed. Wind shifted constantly in the channel, bouncing between surfaces that confused the airflow. Her altimeter flashed yellow. It wasn't a warning yet, just a nudge. Leah eased off the throttle, letting the aircraft drop another 40 feet. The nose tilted into the descent. Outside the canopy, the world was baked red and orange, shadows forming strange angles along the inner ridgeline. Light played tricks at this hour. The rocks shimmered in heat, even though the sun had begun to slide toward the far horizon. The warthog grumbled low as she trimmed pitch. Her seat vibrated with the motion, and the stick pushed slightly against her palm. The HUD showed no targets, no lock, no radar contact. Her visibility came from glass and instinct. She watched for what the systems could not see. Then she found it. At first, just the flash of steel. Then the burned-out shape of what had once been a transport vehicle, its frame folded into the base of the canyon wall like it had been shoved there. Flames licked out from under the axle. Black smoke poured from a breached side panel. It wasn't old. The heat pattern was too active. Someone had survived the initial impact. She slid her hand over to the IR scope toggle and tapped twice. The overlay blinked to life, scattered heat signatures. 6, maybe 7, low to the ground, tight cluster. One leaned against the transport shell, another crouched behind a slab of debris. None of them moved fast enough to signal freedom. A faint burst of static hit her comms, then fell silent. She adjusted frequency, tapped into the emergency band, and caught part of it 4 words, torn by signal loss. Ridge above, surrounded, fire, repeat. That was all. Her thumb tapped the transmit key once but didn't speak. No one was listening. Not anymore. She checked her cannon status. 1 burst remaining. Barrel ready. The HUD would not lock at this elevation. Her targeting system needed distance. She didn't have it. Not from here. Her thumb rested lightly on the fire toggle. The JAO 8 didn't need a lot of room, just clarity. Leah pulled up 30 feet and circled once, banking low and tight. She let the ridgeline slide beneath her, studied its spine, then marked the bend just above where the enemy had to be approaching. They would flank from high. That's what she would have done, use the canyon drop as funnel and drive downward. The pinned squad couldn't move. She saw it in the way they clustered, no one trying to break out. They were boxed. Her mind mapped the turn automatically. She saw the ridgeline from their angle, saw the arc of cannon fire it would take to reach it. The angle was narrow, but manageable. The wind at this level was cutting sideways, not down. That helped. Less lift loss. She checked fuel again. 100.0. Enough. She stayed quiet. There was nothing else to say. No one had cleared the airspace. No one had seen the fire. No one had dropped into this depth with eyes open, except her. The heat haze from the burning transport blurred her lower viewport. She adjusted slightly, setting her trim to manual, and dropped a flare not for targeting, but to read wind drag. It pulled west, steady. She could work with that. The A-10 pushed into the return arc, close to the canyon mouth. She flattened the wings briefly, then banked again, shallow and exact. Her teeth stayed pressed together. No tension in her face. Just focus. The ridge edge emerged ahead, just high enough to glow in the falling light. Shapes moved, not clear, but enough. The approach path was aligned. The wind still cross-cut at one angle. No swirl. Her trigger arm stayed still. Every bolt in the frame hummed. Her seat shook once normal stress at this speed. This angle. She made no correction. Her focus dropped to the range band. 3 seconds until engagement range. She lowered her elevation another 2 meters, skimmed the rock line. One of the friendly IR signatures shifted, pointing upward. They had seen her now. It didn't matter if command had. They weren't here. The GAU-8 indicator showed ready. Burst set. She took one breath, slid her hand forward, and began to squeeze. She didn't aim with the HUD. She aimed with memory. With pencil roots drawn in quarters of canyon turns back at her desk. With what her father taught her about wind shadows and heat shimmer. With what the metal under her boots whispered through the stick. Ahead, the ridge flared into full shape. She was already locked in. The canyon throat closed around her like a muscle. The walls tightened, not just in distance but in pressure. The A-10 held its line, low and clean, the nose perfectly level with the fold in the ridge ahead. Leah's eyes didn't leave the terrain. There was no HUD support. No targeting cue. She didn't need one. She knew where the turn would break. She had drawn it a dozen times in silence. The first movement appeared just above the ridge crest, 3 figures rising in staggered silhouette, climbing toward the pinned squad. One carried a launcher. The others were close behind. No panic, no rush. They thought they were uncontested. The advantage was theirs. The GAU-8 began to spin. It didn't announce itself loudly, just a rising hum in the center of her chest. Her thumb settled on the fire control. She adjusted flaps half a notch and corrected pitch manually. 1 second, then another. The wind pushed across her cockpit from the left. Soft but steady. She fired. The burst ripped through the canyon like a wall being dragged sideways through time. Thunder. Then teeth. The recoil kicked her back into the seat. Not hard, just honest. It was the rhythm of a machine with no need to raise its voice. The rounds walked the edge of the ridge, exploding dust, shale, and heat outward in a single controlled arc. Below, the pinned squad ducked instinctively as rock fell around them. Then nothing. The air filled with the echo of what she had done. And then stillness. She flew through the debris cloud without hesitation, the A-10 clearing the last rise by meters. The canopy went gray with dust, then cleared. The heat shimmer flattened. Smoke rose behind her in a long diagonal smear across the sky. "Whoever that was, thank you," came a voice through the emergency band. The tone wasn't polished. It was stunned, real. Her hand remained steady on the stick. She eased the throttle slightly and leveled out. The altimeter steadied, 100.0 on fuel. Her heart rate didn't climb. On the main channel, confusion replaced silence. A controller's voice stuttered once, then cleared his throat. Unscheduled fire recorded at grid 7-8. All units confirm ordnance expenditure. Static answered first, then call signs began to filter in. Raptor 1, negative fire. Viper lead, clean. Echo 4, not us. There was a pause, then a clipped tone, sharper than the others. Who authorized the strike? Leah keyed her mic without urgency. Her voice came through calm, neutral. This is Warthog 3. 1 cannon burst expended at grid 7-8. Target ridge suppressed. 7 friendlies safe. Another pause, this one longer. Her HUD now flickered back to normal flight mode. The low-altitude advisory disappeared. She could see the open desert rising ahead. Base sat somewhere beyond it, still unaware of what had shifted in the air. Warthog 3, said the voice again, slower this time. Confirm return to base. Copy, she replied. RTB. Payload empty. She clicked the comms off. The canyon lay behind her now, reshaped by a moment no one expected. She didn't turn to look. She had already seen everything she needed to. The friendly signals were moving now, clear on infrared, reshuffling into a safe cluster. One of them raised a hand as she climbed. She caught it in a flicker of wing shadow, then lost it again. She adjusted altitude and began the slow ascent. The A-10 groaned a little in the turn, as it always did. Not a complaint, just acknowledgement. She took it slow. There was no need to climb fast. No one was chasing her. Her hand came off the fire toggle. It hovered a moment, then fell to rest on the throttle quadrant. The last round was gone. Her mission log would say 1 entry cannon expended, single burst, confirmed strike, nothing more. She left the terrain low and kept her course level, letting the jet hum beneath her like a chord played on memory alone. In her right pocket, a folded sketch waited. She had drawn this arc weeks ago without knowing why. Now it had a shape. The lines matched. Ahead, the light was flattening across the edge of the airfield horizon. She would be back before full dark. Her canopy still bore the stain of smoke and grit, a long smear that cut diagonally across the glass like a scar the jet had chosen to keep. No one would greet her when she landed. There would be questions, replays, maybe a closed-door conversation. That was fine. The only thing that mattered had already happened. Behind her, the canyon returned to silence. The squad was still alive. The enemy was not coming over that ridge. And the air would remember. Leah brought the A-10 in low over the last markers and touched down without a flare. The tires held firm to the concrete, the frame heavy with dust and carbon scoring. Her nose cone bore a long streak of black, soot baked in by the heat of the cannon burst. The metal around the barrel still shimmered faintly as she rolled past the flight line, engines spooling down with a tired but willing groan. No one waved her in. No handlers jogged forward to greet her. She taxied to the far edge of the tarmac, near the auxiliary intake station, and brought the aircraft to a stop. The silence in her headset felt final now. Not cold, but complete. She ran the shutdown sequence slowly. Her gloves, clipped at her hip, swung once as she pulled off her helmet. The air inside the cockpit was dry and smelled faintly of brake pad and oil. She let it sit there a moment before unstrapping. Her movements clean and practiced, no wasted motion. On the line ahead, a few techs were gathered around a training drone. One of them glanced up as her canopy rose. He nudged the guy beside him, but neither moved, just watched. Another figure, a younger crew member with a clipboard tucked under one arm, took a step forward, then paused, uncertain. His eyes moved from the scorched metal to the face behind the visor, then back again. He said nothing. Leah climbed down the ladder and let her boots land hard on the tarmac. The sound echoed against the hangar wall. She adjusted the strap on her side panel and walked away from the jet without looking back. The heat from the cannon had left a faint discoloration down the wing route, like a signature no one would notice unless they knew where to look. The sun was low now, dipping behind the fuel depot and throwing long shadows across the slab. She walked through one of them, the hem of her flight suit catching on the breeze. Near the loading zone, 2 officers passed carrying gear crates. Neither looked up. A patch of spilled coolant reflected the gold sky in thin ribbons along the concrete. She stepped around it without breaking pace. Back at the outer gear shed, she hung her helmet on the hook inside the door and pulled a rag from the supply bin. The canopy glass would still be warm, and she wanted to get the grit off before it dried in place. She crossed back toward the aircraft. No one stopped her. She started with the canopy edges, wiping slowly, not pressing. The streaks came off in pale arcs. The wind picked up slightly behind her, pushing the scent of heat-warped oil and cordite across the pad. She finished the last pass and stood back, cloth folded twice in her hand. The A-10 looked the same, heavy, honest, used. The sun slipped fully below the horizon as the first hangar lights flickered on. She turned. He wasn't in uniform, just fatigues and an unzipped vest, dust still clinging to the cuffs. The junior officer from the pinned unit stood about 10 feet away, helmet under one arm, his face tired in a way that didn't come from flying. He stopped, looked once at the aircraft, then back at her. "Ma'am," he said, quiet but sure, "you saved us." "We didn't think anyone saw." She didn't speak, just met his eyes and nodded once. "They said the bird that fired was unidentified." He almost smiled. Didn't sound unidentified to us. He held the helmet tighter, like it anchored him. "I just wanted to say thank you. That's all." She didn't offer her name. He didn't ask. After a moment, he gave a small nod and turned back toward the line of field trucks gathering near the edge of the lot. She watched him walk until he disappeared behind the refuel tanks. Then she returned the rag to the bin and wiped her hands on the side of her suit. The wind had dropped again. The noise from the drone crew was gone. Somewhere, behind the tower, a muffled announcement crackled to life, calling another sortie into prep. Her name wasn't on it. She walked the length of the pad back toward the utility lockers. Her steps were even. The burn mark on the canopy had dried now, etched into the finish. The techs would probably scrub it clean by morning. She reached her bench at the corner of the bay and sat down without comment. Her gloves were still clipped to her belt, her boots dusted with grit from the canyon floor. She pulled the flight log from her side pocket but didn't open it. The sky above the field had turned a flat violet gray. She didn't look up. She didn't need to. By the second morning, the field board had shifted. Leah's name appeared one line higher than before. It was written in the same marker, same lettering, same dry tone that listed every other pilot's call sign. No arrows, no notes, no explanation. Most of the team passed it without comment. A few paused at their own assignments, nodding quietly or tapping updates into their devices. No one said her name aloud. The sky was pale and windless that day. The airfield was active, but not hurried. Leah crossed the tarmac at her usual pace, stepping around cable coils and fuel hoses without looking down. Her boots were clean now, but the laces were still dust-caked from the canyon floor. She wore the same flight suit, same gloves clipped to her belt, same cap tucked behind her collar. Nothing about her walk had changed. Ahead, her A-10 sat under partial cover. A crew of 2 was brushing down the wings, one working a long-handled rag across the port side panel. Another moved toward the nose, polishing in slow circles along the right edge of the fuselage. She stopped beside them and spoke gently. "Leave that part," she said. The younger tech looked over. The streak. She nodded. "It stays." He paused, then lowered the cloth and stepped back, understanding enough not to ask why. Leah ran one gloved hand along the wing seam, feeling the warmth that lingered even in the morning. The aircraft had already been cleared for another loadout. She had seen the tag clipped to the maintenance checklist. It would fly again soon. The heat would burn new marks into the frame. That was fine. She didn't linger. She crossed back toward the utility path and ducked into the low corridor that led behind Hangar 4. Her quarters hadn't changed. Inside, the cot was made, her map still pinned to the wall. One topographic sheet hung by a single tack. Now, corners worn from handling. She had marked it with graphite arcs, flight lines sketched in faint pencil, elevations measured by hand. She sat at the desk without turning on the light. Her logbook was already open. She reached into the left pocket of her suit and pulled out the data card from her HUD recorder. It clicked softly as she slotted it into her reader. The screen came to life, and she advanced the feed frame by frame. Canyon, ridge, the heat bloom from the burst, dust lifting, flare, echo. Then the moment where the cannon fire met, rock, pure compression and light. She paused it there. The frame froze with the muzzle flare suspended mid-image, a ribbon of smoke coiling forward. Beyond it, the ridgeline fractured just as the enemy had begun to rise. She studied it for a while, not with awe, but recognition. It had looked exactly like this in her sketches. The slope, the cut, the angle of approach, all matched what she had drawn the week before. She took her pen and opened a fresh page in the back of her logbook. On the top line, she wrote a single entry code. Nothing official, just a string she used for personal notes. She drew the terrain slowly, exact lines, each one shaped from memory. She included the wind taper, the position of the burning transport, the curve of the final turn. Then, beneath it, she wrote one word: confirmed. She closed the book without hesitation and set it on the corner of the desk. Later that afternoon, she returned to the board near the comms tent. Flight rosters had updated again. New sorties, new crew pairings. Her name was listed next to a close pattern drill in Sector 12. Not a high visibility run, but not a shadow either. She scanned the list, then stepped away. As she turned, she caught the eyes of one of the junior pilots from the ready room. He had passed her a dozen times before, always with a nod or nothing at all. This time he paused. Just enough. His gaze dropped to her belt, then back up. He didn't speak, but he looked longer than he needed to. She didn't return the glance, just kept walking. The rest of the evening passed without noise. In the low glow of her bunk lamp, Leah flipped through the pages of her older maps, checking notations, refining a few curves. Outside, the wind picked up again, moving light dust across the windows and rattling one of the exterior pipes. She adjusted the tack on the corner of the flight sheet to hold it in place. The sound faded. She reached for her pencil. There was more sky to map. She was told to return to base, that her work was done, that there was nothing left to see. But she saw what others missed, and instead of asking for permission, she trusted her own eyes. Leah didn't chase recognition. She flew low. She flew alone. And when it mattered most, she acted with precision no system had planned for. There was no medal, no announcement, only the lives she saved and the silence she returned to. Sometimes, strength isn't loud. Sometimes, courage doesn't need an audience. And sometimes, the people you overlook are the ones keeping everything from falling apart. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. Share your thoughts in the comments. And follow for more quiet, powerful stories about those who act not to be seen, but because it's right.